So my name is Charles Monnett. I'm an employee of SupportLogic. I'm Director of Product Management. I was actually the first hired employee at SupportLogic. So it started with Krishna and then myself. He hired me as the lead backend engineer. I worked on things like the data platform, ML platform, first few generations of signal NLP, keyword NLP. So if you're a SupportLogic customer, you're familiar with things like sentiment score, need attention score. My name is on those patents. Those are the kinds of things that I was working on in the first few years. A few years ago, I moved into engineering management. I was one of the teams I was managing was responsible for the intelligent case assignment product at SupportLogic. And then approximately 6 months ago, I moved into product management at SupportLogic, and I'm still working with our the product that we call intelligent case assignment, used for case routing and assignment. I would also note that before SupportLogic, I was hired. I was a backline support engineer at VMware. I began getting interested in machine learning. That's why Krishna is kind of how he found me and decided to hire me. We had a rotational duty as tech lead. We had a manual push model where a tech lead, which we called a guru, would assign cases to people. It was supposed to be a monthly rotation. I was fresh out of college, and they ended up sticking me with it for more than 18 consecutive months. So for about a year and a half, I assigned almost every case that came into my team. So since then, this has been a topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart. Obviously, and it's been about 7 years at SupportLogic. So in that time, I've gotten really quite familiar with it, even more so. So FT, do you mind if I throw it to you?
Sure. So my name is Francoise, FT. I wrote a book called The Art of Support, and I have a company called FT Works, where we work with technology companies to help them improve customer success and also support operations. So as you can imagine, in today's presentation, Charles is going to be the AI side of things, and I'm going to be the practitioner side of things. That's the way we are going to divide up the duties. So Charles, I will start by talking a little bit about what case routing or case assignment is, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Really quick, I'm going to do a quick preview for people and also lay down some ground rules. So first thing is we'll get into kind of some background for the problem, why this is important, why it's important to route cases and assign them well, like what's it going to mean for your business, establish some clear terminology, which most people on the call will be familiar with, but we want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we'll dive into, spend the bulk of the time establishing best practices for routing and assignment, things to keep in mind, some key takeaways there for y'all to, leave the session with. But one thing I'd really like to note is that FT and I made a very concerted effort to keep the material fairly lean so that we could accommodate as much audience-driven material as possible. So the one thing I wanted to really highlight before we begin is making sure that people feel comfortable and in fact encouraged to put things either in the chat, or I think especially the Q&A would really help our team on the back end here. And then, at any time, in fact, go ahead, if you have things you want to know or things you want to learn from the session, like go ahead and type them in now and we'll see what we can get to in the session. We really want to make sure that we're addressing the interests of the people here. So with that said, I think FT, if you're going to begin with the first topic, I will also note that we are going to start the first poll, which is relevant to, we'll open that up in a moment, and that will kind of be going in the background as FT begins to introduce the problem and kind of the bulk of the material we'll cover today. So, all right, FT, sorry about that, but the floor is yours once more.
No worries, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, case routing, case assignment, and why it's important. And meanwhile, please go to the poll and vote. We really want to know. So case routing, I tend to say case assignment instead. The idea is, how do we get these issues that we have, cases floating around, how do we get them assigned to somebody who can actually do something about it and resolve the issue? So as you can imagine, you need to be quick because you need to meet SLAs, right? And then you need to send it to the right person who can really resolve it quickly and correctly. And the outcome of all of that is happy customers. We want that, right? Happy agents. We don't often think about this, but there are many ways of assigning cases that piss people off, to be crude, right? And we want to avoid that, right? And then the third thing is we want to increase our internal efficiency. In other words, if I misassign a case, right? If I give it to Charles and it should go to FT instead, then we're going to have to hand it off, and it's going to take time, and it's going to delay things, and it's not going to be a very efficient way of doing things. So those are our 3 goals: customer satisfaction, employee experience, and third is internal efficiency. With that, Charles, do we have answers to the poll that we can share? We asked you to tell us what it was for you.
We do. We don't have a ton of responses quite yet. It's evenly split between customer experience and employee experience, actually. And internal efficiency has no votes.
Okay. Well, we will definitely talk about customer experience and employee experience. So despite, to me, the fact that case assignment is really important for everything else that we do, it's not a very popular topic, right? Look at us, we're day 3 of the conference and we are just starting to talk about it, right? A lot of support executives never really think about case assignment. It happens in the background, they don't really know how, and they don't really worry about it. Whereas, for instance, escalations get a lot of interest, right? Case assignment does not. And in my mind, it's often done in a not ideal way. So let's talk about how we can organize case assignment. Charles, can you put the next slide on?
Sure.
So essentially, we can do case assignments in 2 ways. We can pull or we can push, right? By pulling, what we mean is that the support engineers, is on the left-hand side in blue, the support engineer decides when they want to get another case. And either it automatically pops a case to them, maybe the most urgent one to be responded to, right? But that's the way it works, right? Or there's a manual component, so the agent, the support engineer, is able to go look through the cases and say, I want this one, right? That's what the manual is. And then the other way is a push model, which Charles was alluding to. So in the push model, we have the cases, and the cases get dropped essentially in the lap of the agents. It could be done in a completely automated way. Most of the time, at least with my clients, it is done manually, exactly the way Charles was describing it, which is there is a queue monitor who is typically a team lead, but could be anybody else, right? And that person decides, okay, here's a case, whom do I give it to? Do I give it to Charles? Do I give it to FT, etc.? Right? So think about what you are using, and there will be a poll where we really want to know what methods you are using, because we'll organize the talk a little bit differently. Thank you, Lynn, for
that poll is now open.
Thank you. So while we wait for the result of the poll, please vote. I want to talk about the problems that we see, the challenges that we see with these methods. So let's start with the pull method. The pull method has one wonderful thing about it, which is, as the agent, as the support engineer, I decide when I can attend to something new, which is a wonderful way of controlling my workload a little bit. That's really nice, right? However, if it's an automated system, most of the time, I'm not talking smart AI systems here, right? I'm talking about what we've been working with so far, right? Most of the time, the automated system is going to be nothing more than a round robin. So I just get the next one, that's it, right? There's no intelligence to it. And if I have a manual way of pulling, then there is the dreaded cherry picking approach, which is, you know, I go to the list of cases and I say, oh, this one, that's hard, I'm not going to do it. This one, oh my God, it's what this customer yelled at me last week. No, thank you. I'll take this one, it's easy, right? And I will be able to have one more closed case today. Right? So those are the problems on the pull side. On the push side, if it's an automated system, then again, old style systems, Charles will tell us that AI will solve some of these problems, obviously, but in the old style automated, it's usually pretty silly, and it just puts it, you know, one at a time without really thinking who it is, just get a warm body on the case, right? If it's a manual push, then you told us you don't really care about internal efficiency, but I do. And obviously it's going to consume the time of the queue monitors doing that, right? And more importantly, there's a lot of bias in this particular process where the queue monitor is a human being, right? So they are going to have thoughts and ideas, conscious or not, right? So they're going to say things like, well, FT has 26 cases in her queue and Charles only has 4. Clearly, I'm going to give stuff to Charles because, you know, he's the one who has bandwidth, right? Now, if I do this every day, Charles is going to do a lot more work than me. That might be a problem for you, right? Or it could be even more subtle than that is, well, I could give this to James over there, but, you know, James is always so grumpy. I just don't want to do that. So I'm just going to give it to the person who is nice, right? Which is not a very good way of assigning cases. So these models, as they exist today, have their issues. And obviously what we're going to do next is talk about remedies for that. Before we do that, let's talk about the poll. Charles, what are you saying in the poll?
So predominantly people use a manual poll model, and one person is using auto poll, and no one's got a push model. At least no one is willing to own up to having a push model.
Oh, because I said it was my least favorite method, probably, right?
I don't know why.
Okay, just a reminder to everybody that we are taking questions as we go, so go for it. So what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about best practices. I'm going to talk about 4 of them, and Charles will chime in and give us the AI perspective on these. So the first one I will talk about is around this idea of availability. Remember that case assignment is a matching process, right? So we are matching skills and availability of the support engineers, the agents, right, with the difficulty and the topics of the cases, right? That's what we're doing. So about availability, one of the big problems in push models in particular is this idea that at any time something could be dropped on my head and then it disrupts what I am doing. It's not a problem if you have a low complexity support organization because you're constantly basically going from one case to another. But if you're in a high complexity support organization, like Charles used to be at VMware, or like the ones that I usually work with, then this idea of having times of the day when I have no new cases is really helpful, because then I can do my deep dives at that time. I can do my troubleshooting. I can do my repros, anything that where I need a lot of time and I need undisturbed time so that I can make progress. So I would say if you just do one thing to improve the current system that you have, by the way, when I'm speaking, I'm very agnostic. AI, not AI, automated, not automated, doesn't matter. Carve out these times when people can have no new cases. Ideally, they tend to be times that would be long enough, right, to do an in-depth troubleshooting. Charles, you want to add anything to that?
I can say that, you know, this is probably one of the best kind of pieces of feedback that we got from customers when developing our second generation of our intelligent case assignment product, was making sure that we were able to serve this capability, because it's proved really, really essential for people being able to actually adopt the product and kind of embrace it, especially when they're starting to roll in automation, because it's so essential. Because people just sort of really say, like, what do you mean? Are you just going to push cases to my agents, you know, all day, every day? And the answer is no. We introduced this thing we call kind of agent shifts, and we made sure to separate out between assignment hours and working hours, so that those working hours, so that you can create working hours that do not overlap with the assignment hours, so that we can still make sure that agents are aligned with customers from a time zone point of view, if they need to meet, screen share, all those kind of things, but then they won't get those new cases and they won't be disruptive. One interesting model that we'd seen from a customer is that they kind of had a perfect inversion within a geo. So it's kind of, you know, they'd have an 8-hour shift, and then half the agents would take new cases in the morning and the other half would take cases in the afternoon. And they'd kind of, each one would work on their cases from the previous day, their previous shift, you know, kind of when they weren't in that intake mode. So I think this kind of ties into something that you'll hear me speak to pretty frequently. I talk about the AI or automation aspects of each of these, which is that almost always you're going to need something more than just AI. Like, there's a big difference between AI being able to do something interesting or do something noteworthy and being able to actually solve a problem for you. And you're going to need these kind of realistic considerations to drive the employee experience that you might be looking for, which it sounds like people in the session are looking to push. They are looking to have that employee experience. And retaining agents is notoriously difficult. There's a very, very, very short lifetime of an individual agent or support engineer at a company. So if people are worried about that employee experience, trying to find something that lets them route cases efficiently but protect their agent time seems extremely important.
And I must add, a lot of people who work in complex support organizations really have a need to immerse themselves very deeply into issues and have trouble multitasking, right? So anytime you interrupt them, you say, well, it's short, you know, they just have an alert that says new case. Well, it might take them 15 or 20 minutes to go back to where they were, right? So think about that. I'm a great fan of no intake times. Okay, so number two. Number two is around the matching itself. So the example I gave earlier was the queue monitor looks at FT's queue. FT has 26 cases. Charles has 4. There is a human bias to say, you know, FT is obviously overwhelmed. Let's give the work to Charles. And it's not entirely wrong. It's just if you do that every day, then FT, who could just be a lazy butt and be sitting on a bunch of cases, right, is going to have a really good life compared to Charles, who is just cranking away all day, right? Probably loving it, knowing him, but still, it's not quite fair to do that. So again, whether you're doing it manually or you're doing with an algorithm, you really want to look at workload balancing over time. I mean, maybe if I have 26 cases, maybe today I should be excused, but by tomorrow I should be expected to have cleared my queue enough that I'm on the queue again. So look at backlog, consider the backlog, but it should not be the one way that you get things done. Charles, any comments about algorithms and backlog?
Yeah, so I cannot wait to talk about the algorithmic side of this, but I would also note, just based on my previous experience within support, is like, you know, for one, I never had anyone on my team who would sit on cases to inflate their backlog. I assure you, everyone on my team worked equally as hard to close out their cases on time. That was absolutely the case, 110%. If I'm remembering correctly.
You didn't work with me, certainly, then, huh?
Was that as when I was performing that role, which we called the guru, like as guru, this is probably the thing that took the most of my time, was like, because fairly quickly I can understand, like, you know, we had a skill matrix, we had a static skill matrix, like, oh, this is probably a good fit for them, and this is probably a good fit for them, you know, X, Y, Z, whatever. But making sure that going through and actually trying to get the workload beyond just the number of cases was where I spent most of my time saying, okay, you know, this person, like, okay, they've got these cases. What's the priority? And like, which one's escalated? Oh, that's a P3 that's escalated, or like, but that's a P2 that's escalated, like, or it was escalated, you know, these kind of little things that they're the kinds of things that led to us being able to make a fairly sophisticated backlog or agent availability algorithm, once we have people on staff who have that kind of real world experience who can call to it pretty frequently. But I'd say from the manual model, this took an extreme amount of time, and it's still very, very, very fuzzy. I already took a decent amount of time talking about my kind of a human experience doing this, but I would just note that, as I noted before, like, this is something that really excites me about our AI, because it's such a big opportunity for us to incorporate some, what are, you know, algorithmically, they might be some fairly straightforward inputs, but achieve some really quite sophisticated behavior in a way that really makes sure that you get the desired experience that you're looking for. And by that, I mean, we really just want to make sure that we're actually protecting your agents. Like, if that's something that you're concerned about, then it's something that people are fairly quick to cause alarm from an automated system. So we tend to be quite protective of that, and really making sure we focus a lot on making sure that availability model, or the backlog model, is correct, so that we're not assigning cases. Even if someone's a great skill fit, if they've already got 2 escalations and 20 cases to their name, the customer or the agent is not going to have a good experience with that case. So let's get it to someone else, and let's kind of live to fight another day. And we'll, you know, they'll pick back up, you know, another day.
Thank you, Charles. So let's talk about the third best practice, which is around skills. So we've been talking about careful matching, right? Careful matching of skills to individuals. And most of the time, that's what you want to do. But there are some exceptions. So let's think about two of them and see what we can do about this. The first exception is SEV1. So when you have a SEV1 case, usually your SLA is pretty tight for response. I have clients who have 15-minute SLAs on SEV1, which is insane, but that's what they do, right? So if you're trying to do this careful matching every time, right, you might not be able to do careful matching and availability matching and everything else for those really fast moving cases. So think of it like the emergency department. I hope you never have an opportunity to visit one, but if you go into the emergency department, people don't sit around thinking, oh, this patient just came in. I wonder, perhaps it's something about their liver. Maybe I should get a liver specialist. No, they don't do that. They say, okay, this person is bleeding. Let's get them on the table right now and stop the bleeding or restart their heart or get them breathing or whatever. There's a small number of behaviors we need to deploy in emergencies, and the important thing is time as opposed to specialization. So for SEV1, it's perfectly okay to not have the perfect match. And then the other situation where the perfect match may not be quite as important is when you have a learner. So let's say Charles and I work together. I know that's his nightmare because, you know, I don't close my cases fast, right? But let's imagine, right? The two of us are working together, right? And he is the specialist of ML. That's not kidding. He really is, right? And I am just learning ML. An ML case comes in. Do I give it to Charles or do I give it to FT? Well, the right person is obviously Charles because he's the specialist, right? But if I never get a single ML case, I am never going to learn, right? So you might want, for learners, you might want to have exceptions. A very common way to do that is to let them cherry pick stuff and the non-urgent stuff, right? But obviously you can do that in an automated way as well. So here are two situations where the perfect match may not be quite what we normally think about. Charles, you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. There's kind of two different ways that we can look at this. One is, again, it's kind of, there's this overlap between the AI and automation. From an automation point of view, we've seen it's fairly common for our customers to want to handle this problem differently for those very, very tight SLAs versus the rest of their cases. And in fact, it's something that, you know, if they're worried about it, we just want to focus on saying, hey, look, this is a very small percentage of your cases. If we can automate the assignment of 98, 99% of your cases, or, you know, 97% or more, then that, especially if you have like some other kind of manual model, this should free you up to make sure that you can invest a little bit more into nailing that SEV1 process until you get confidence to potentially automate that. Or, you know, leverage some other techniques that you might have in mind for those kind of systems. So I'd say it's extremely common for us to see people wanting to, you know, embrace our products in the vast majority of those cases, and then kind of hold out to protect those few cases. The one customer that we talked to had a 5-minute SLA. They're an authentication provider, and so I was like, okay, you know what? It's not something that I, in engineering, wanted to be on the hook for myself. So it was like, okay, let's focus on the rest of your case volume. So I'd say that seems to be quite typical for us as well. And as far as learning goes, this is again where you'd want to see, you want something more than just AI. You want something that you can adapt and control and has some flexibility and that you have some insight into, which is something that we take I would say we put a fair amount of extra effort into like making sure that we're realistically solving people's support problems rather than kind of throwing AI over the wall and hoping for the best. So being able to account for kind of nudging people's skills one way or the other, being able to ramp up the way that you get cases into people's hands, especially if they're new, or really also you talk about learning, like people switching teams. Okay, the ML is going to learn from their past data. You just switch from one team to another, or you just move from California to North Carolina. Now you're in a different geo, maybe you're on a different team. I can't rely purely on machine learning to assign cases to you anymore, because the data from the past does not correspond with the behavior you want in the future. So without getting too deep into any specifics, like please forgive me for doing that, I would just say it's kind of where you'd want to end up with a system that's has AI as a part of it that you can leverage for automation and getting things right the bulk of the time, but then allows you to control or tweak around the edges so that you get the behavior you want 100% of the time instead of getting it 95% of the time and kind of dealing with the fallout the other few percent of the time.
Thank you. Let me talk about the fourth best practice. And meanwhile, Charles, there's a question in the Q&A I think might be for you. So I'll let you think about it while I talk. So the fourth one is about metrics. And here I want to talk about how we can measure the success of our case assignment methodology. So right now, what most people do is they measure SLA achievement. And that's very important, as Charles was just telling us. If you have a 5-minute response, oh my God, I'm having heart palpitations. So you need to make sure that you fulfill your promises. Remember that SLAs are promises that we make to customers, right? And anytime we fail an SLA, we are letting somebody down. Think about it, right? So SLA achievement is great. We should look at it, no problem. Keep working at it, very important. But I would highly recommend to please look at another metric, which I've never seen really done in a satisfying way. And I call it the one agent resolution percentage. So the idea is there are cases that once they're assigned are going to be resolvable by that one person without any collaboration needed, no handoffs, nothing like that, right? And they are going to be resolved properly by the original agent. And there is some goodness about this, right? Certainly in terms of internal efficiency, but also customer satisfaction. They like having something handled by one person. So I would suggest that's something to look at, and that's something to look at, even though it has the word agent in it, it's something to look at in general as a process, right? It is not a metric that you would want to assign to an agent, because if you did, think of what would happen. I have a goal, right, of, I don't know, having 80% of my cases resolved by me without any handoffs or collaboration. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to hesitate to hand off. I'm going to hold on to my cases really tight, right, no matter what. And that's not the best for the customer. So it's a great methodology for the process. It is not appropriate for agents. I hope I made that clear. Charles, you want to talk about that at all?
No, I think you've covered it plenty well. I would say it all comes down to incentives. What are you incentivizing people to do? And you want to structure, I'm just going to kind of rehash what you're saying a little bit, but you want to make sure that you're monitoring your system differently than you're monitoring your individuals to make sure you get the best performance out of each.
Sounds good. So with that, we are going to go to Q&A. While we do the Q&A, I'll just leave the takeaways here for people to read them if they want to. And we do have questions. Charles, you want to take the question about the Q0 or do you want me to do it?
Okay. I am having a little bit of difficulty understanding some of the questions. So does AI handle case assignment when you don't have Q0 most days? That is, all tickets created in a given day won't get assigned that same day. I'm not precisely sure what you mean by that. Do you, FT?
Yeah, so Claire, thank you for asking the question for one thing. The idea of Q0 is that at the end of the day, our incoming queue is entirely empty and we have assigned everything out, right? I don't think it really matters. I mean, Q0 is a good thing to have in the sense that it shows that all the cases at least are on their way to being worked on because they have been assigned. I don't think it matters at all to have Q0, to have a zero queue or not. You just assign so that you can meet your SLAs, right? Remember that, right? So for example, it's 5 p.m. on the East Coast. I want to take care of anything that is due today, but I could have a case that's due tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I don't need to assign it right now, right? I could definitely assign it tomorrow morning. I don't think it matters at all. And the principles would be the same anyway.
Okay. I would touch on, we're at time, so I'll just kind of briefly try to swipe at both of these two things, which is that we are rolling out functionality later this year that allows for kind of a hybrid push-pull where we push alerts to people and then kind of let you pull the cases out. So that new case comes in, we run a bunch of AI on it and say, hey, we think these people are good for it, or here's who we think the case might go to, and then letting you pull those cases in based on the information that you get there. So so the reason, Claire, I think that might help with your concern is that this gives you a lot more flexibility for that assignment. So you're saying, okay, I don't need to automatically assign. I just need to make sure that I'm getting these. And then if I think that there's someone, especially if it's a low priority case, maybe like a 24-hour response delay, something like that, then you can say, okay, maybe for higher priority cases, I'll automatically farm them out to people. I'll push them out to people. But then as the SLAs get longer, we can be more comfortable with letting people pull in case you think someone more skilled is coming on in the next, in the next shift. So we want to be able to allow those two things to coexist, and that should be coming out next quarter to be able to do that with, I would say an extremely high degree of flexibility and control. It's kind of, to me, I'm really excited about it because I think it's kind of the ultimate case assignment system because it allows you to, I would say, kind of asymmetrically allow you to get push and pull models and kind of some time-based backups of saying, okay, let people pull cases, but if a case sits unassigned for long enough, then push it to somebody and things like that. So that'll all be second half of the year for SupportLogic. But we've gone 2 minutes over.
No,
so
we're not. We have until 12:45, so it's, I mean.
Oh, we do?
We have time. Yeah, we have plenty.
I thought we had 30 minutes. Oh.
Yeah, 30 minutes to talk and then 15 minutes to chat with people. No wonder you were speaking so fast at the beginning.
I was like, oh, I gotta get to, I was like, sorry, I'm gonna answer 2 questions at once. I'm gonna try to do all this stuff. Oh, I apologize. Okay.
No worries.
All right, forget about it.
So I wanted to, and you've said a few things about Monique's. So Monique had a question about being able to pull work that is what's interesting to the engineer, right, versus the assignment. And I think you made the point right now, right, in your answer, which is we can certainly let cases sit on the queue and allow people to cherry pick, right, and then we will assign when it gets closer to SLA time, right? That's what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So did I lose FT?
No, I mean, I'm still here and I can still hear you.
I apologize.
Okay, so I think what we're saying is that it is good to have an engine that is able to suggest or do the entire match automatically. That's good. But it doesn't mean that you could not let people pull, that is, choose what they work on in addition to that. You could do that. You could certainly do that, depending on your business roles.
Okay, we have not received any new questions since these. I hope that we've answered these to your satisfaction.
If not, just put something else in the Q&A, and we will get back to that. We have a new questions. Since agents have to do a lot of context switching and decision making anyways when answering cases, isn't it easier for them to just be assigned cases? Do you want me to take it, Charles, or do you want to say something about that?
Well, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, like you and IFT. I mean, it kind of goes down to kind of what you want to kind of leave in the hands of people. I had noticed, honestly, as when I kind of changed from being an engineer to a manager, I had realized how comfortable people are. I'm like very hard-headed, I would say, and very independently minded. It's one of the things that kind of helped me to succeed at an early startup. And I think but practically speaking, a lot of people are more comfortable in an environment in which some structure is provided for them that they can just attempt to flourish within that structure. So I think in the vast majority of cases that can be the case, as long as you are protecting them. If you're if I'm an agent and you're putting me in a situation in which I'm not a good skill fit for this case, or I have a poor history with this customer. We got in a shouting match on the phone last week. It's not best practice, but maybe I let my temper get ahead of me, or this customer, they just haven't liked me for whatever reason. Whether it's skill match, a poor experience with this particular customer, or I'm supposed to be walking out the door in 5 minutes and you're assigning me a new case with a 1 hour response SLA. You're not putting me in a position to succeed, or you're certainly not putting me in a position to enjoy my day-to-day work. So if you have some balance, or you have some operational controls over the system, I would argue that yes, you can end up in a better situation whereby people are being put in a better position to succeed. They're also not being burdened by some of the manual effort that goes into some of the systems that you have today. Like I was referring to, the monthly rotation of, great, now I'm going to spend an hour or two out of my day, reading cases that I'll never work just so I can hand them off to somebody else.
And also be hated by the person I handed them off to. Yeah,
and then I had people come knocking on my door and say, hey, I know you assigned this case to me, but I think it's really this better fit for this other person. Like I've already got this escalation. Can you please, and so on and so forth. So it can free you up from having to deal with all those, I'd say, kind of complications in your day to day. And a lot of the people that we're talking about, agents or engineers, like they love solving these problems and letting them kind of focus on that bread and butter and helping customers out. This is an industry full of people who love to help people. Letting them focus on that can be a great thing.
Yeah, to me, what matters more than the push-pull dichotomy, right, is this idea that we don't have a lot of people reading a lot of cases before anything substantial can be done on the case, right? So having that assignment, either it's pushed on me or I go to the queue and it says, oh, FT, I think you want to work on this case, that will be fine as well. I don't think it's the push versus pull that's important. It's the idea that I don't have to sort through dozens of cases to figure out one that I can work on. I think that's the most important thing. Yeah. So we have a great question in the queue, and I want to talk about it, which is, would there be a factor as the case evolves that the case reassignment might be considered? Absolutely, Rob, you're completely right. So what happens in some of those cases is there's a very terse description, is I get this error, right? Actually, that would be good, but I get an error would be really bad, right? And then I start working on the case. And after a while, I realized, oh, this is really a problem about something else that did not appear in the initial description. And I think the kind of AI engine that Charles is talking about would be 100% capable of saying, okay, now that we know more about this particular issue, now I can assign it to somebody else, somebody who would be more better equipped, right, to resolve the question. Charles, do you want to add to that?
Oh, well, I have a question for you, FT. Might this be why you want to, if you're using single agent closure rate as a way of measuring your assignment system, might this be a reason why you don't want to incentivize agents to keep cases to themselves?
Hallelujah. Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. But it is the same engine, knowing more about the case, is going to do a better job, right?
Mm-hmm. I will say this is something we've actually gotten asked about a lot, and it's something that we've been reluctant to. It's essentially, can you recommend me cases that need to be reassigned? And honestly, personally, I'm a little reluctant to dip my toes into those waters, because if you get it right, I don't, I was like, it's the kind of the risk reward of like, do I want to upset people and say, hey, hey, we think this person is not a good fit for this case? And you're like, hey, what do you mean I'm not a good skill fit for this case? Or what do you mean I'm doing just fine with my backlog or what have you? So,
well, actually, Charles, I hate to interrupt, but you do this all the time with doing LTEs, right? This is likely to escalate. And one of the things that a manager may well do is to say, okay, FT, enough of this. I'm yanking this case from your queue and give it to somebody else, right?
Yes, you got us, because that is, honestly, that's the long arc of the ML, and that's getting kind of closer into the future than it was in the past, of what I call recommended actions based on the likely to escalate predictions. And that absolutely is a part of it. And it also ties into, we have a complete AI platform for support. So being able, if you've got our likely to escalate predictions and, we're running all of the different ML that goes into a case assignment, which is about 12 or 13 predictions that go into each agent recommendation, is being able to say, we think this case is likely to escalate. Oh, we also ran some of our case assignment ML against it. It seems like this person's not a good skill fit, or maybe they started out as a good skill fit. Their backlog was just fine, or their workload was just fine when they started. But this other case that they are assigned to also just already got escalated. So get this one into someone else's hands before this case goes off the rails too. And so being able to run all of that ML and kind of present it in a cohesive way that lets you take the right action in those situations, it is an explicit goal of ours. So I will come clean about that.
One thing I would like to add, slightly tangential to what we're talking about, is if you are working in a swarming environment, the very same assignment engine can help you assign requests from internal people to internal people, right? So we've been talking so far as if all the cases come from customers. Most of them do, right? But the cases or the issues or the questions can also come from inside the team, right? And the same assignment engine can be brought to bear on those, right? Because sometimes I know I need to talk to Charles about it, but sometimes I don't know. It's like, I need somebody who really knows a lot about clusters. Who would that be? I don't know, right? And the same assignment engine could be used, right?
Yes, ma'am, it could. And in fact, that's also an explicit plan of ours. So it's something that we, when I mentioned that there's 12 or 13 different factors that go into agent recommendations, there's different things like, okay, so your time overlap with the customer, your skill match, what we call complexity, matching the complexity of the case against the agent's typical workload, history with the customer, and their current workload. So, but there's a few, you can use those in different combinations to do different things. So we need all of those together to find the right agent for case. But if you want to find SME, SME, or someone to collaborate with, then you say, okay, find me someone who's got these skills and has, can understand this level of complexity that's going on here. But it doesn't matter if they've made the customer upset, because I'll talk to my backend engineer about this. It may not matter if they're on the same time zone as the customer, because I just need to be able to sync with them, or maybe we can talk it out over Slack or something like that. So, the plan is to try and get kind of more miles out of this technology that we've developed, if you will, to be able to kind of help, drive this, say, like throughout the case lifecycle. So not just the initial assignment. We've already got some things in our platform that's specific to reassignment, but then pulling people in to contribute to a case and bring it to conclusion. We expect to be able to leverage much of the technology that we use for assignment, for collaboration and swarming, just kind of in a different mixture, kind of a recipe, different proportions to end up with a slightly different cake. But we're still using, flour, sugar, and eggs.
Okay, I guess we are this time really very much at time.
I'm so sorry.
I do not see any other questions that are waiting for us. So thank you so much for coming here and discussing one of my favorite topics, case assignments. If there is any additional question that you want to ask, but you were shy or whatever, contact us. Otherwise, we're always happy to talk about these things. Thank you very much for being here. And Charles, please add whatever you want.
No, I think you put it very well. One thing that FD and I talked about when planning the session is that this is something we could talk about all day. And in fact, we have talked about this many times before, and I expect that we will continue to talk about it many times in the future. I mentioned this is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm hoping that, especially given the the near infinite wisdom that FT can provide, that this session was really helpful for the people that were able to attend. And I'm really glad that we got an extra 50% over what I thought we'd be able to cover. I thought we had a 30-minute session. 45 minutes worked out great, and we are right on time now. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.